delighted to have one final keynote speak just before Chris and I try and summarise the whole day for you. Gregor has come from a very distinguished background in Scottish reform, who did some very enlightened things not so long ago, which I think have been copied around the world. But Gregor Henderson is now the Clinical Director for Mental Health at Public Health England, and he's going to come and talk to us a little bit about public mental health and the digital technology revolution. Welcome, Gregor. Thanks for coming.
I'm really just going to try and do a little bit of an advert or a plea, really, and start by saying that I'm not from services. I'm no longer a clinician, and I'm also not from the technology sphere at all. But what I would like to share with you is some of the challenges that we face in public health, and see if we can co-produce and co-design some solutions for some of those real challenges. And it's really good for me to come to a day like this, because I don't often, I do get out, but I don't often get out and hear such innovations in a world that I know very little about. But then what I do know a little bit about that was coming across in that last panel session, because we all know about it, is what's important to people, what's important to communities, and designing solutions that meet those people's needs. And I want to try and put this in the context of what is mental health and who owns it, because I don't know about you, but I'm a little bit concerned when I think about the challenge of improving the public's mental health. Who's got ownership of that? And I'm the son of a psychiatrist, so I'm not going to start committing heresy or whatever, but I do sometimes wonder about the rigid control we put around the word mental health that makes it very difficult for communities, people, and families to own some of this space. And I saw that in the design of your program, which I'm not going to be critical of, I'm just going to be observing of it, which is MindTech, Mental Health Technology Symposium. How can evidence keep pace with new technologies in mental health care? As though we all automatically assume what we know good mental health care actually is. So let me indulge you. I've lost the clicker, so. And it magically appears. If I just wave, then it'll click on. So Public Health England, who are we? Well, we're here to protect and improve the nation, that's the nation of England's health, even though some of us who work for Public Health England actually come from Scotland. And one of the things that's really exercising us at the moment and challenging us, and we were, but you would never have believed it, really instrumental in orchestrating with Simon Stevens the whole NHS England 5-year forward view. And obviously, there hadn't just been this discovery that the NHS needs to move more to prevention. That's something that people in public health have been doing for a very, very long period of time. So we see this as a collaborative way to try and get towards more prevention. Because when you think of mental health, you will probably think of mental illness care and treatment first, and you'll probably think of public mental health as something you haven't even heard of before. So what I want to try and do is demystify what this phraseology, public mental health, might mean, but not try and advocate for a separate specialism, because this is for the public's mental health, not for some new discipline of the study of public health. And this was articulated by Dame Sally Davis, who was the first CMO ever to produce a dedicated report to mental health. I and a few others didn't agree with everything that was said in it, but there was lots of really, really good stuff in there. And it advocated for mental health, but it really was advocating for better lives for those with mental illness and better services and better investment. And no one's going to say those aren't good things to do. But what I'd like to do is introduce a bit of balance. Because if we keep investing money in downstream mental illness services, when do we stop doing that? And when do we start promoting good mental health and preventing mental illness and intervening early? And where do we start doing that? Surely we should start doing that in families, in the early years, prenatally, at schools, in workplaces, in the criminal justice system, in housing. People were letting other people off the hook by our obsession that mental health and mental health care can be provided by those who have an invested professional interest in mental illness. So this diagram, very simplistically, is trying to broaden out our look and our gaze to what mental health and the public's mental health could actually be about. And I do believe that you in this room and others who aren't here have some of the technological solutions to improving the way we think and act in mental health. So Dame Sally challenged us to think about the terminology we use, and she's got, if you've got time to look at all the different terminologies and where they've come from and how they come about, then please look at it. A lot of us have been using the phrase mental well-being because when we use the phrase mental health, people think we're talking about mental illness. So we've tried to find a different nomenclature to get people talking about mental well-being. And then you get roundly criticized for talking about mental well-being because there's no evidence that mental well-being improves the lives of those living with mental illness. So you just get caught up in this terminological debate. And quite frankly, we need to get better at it. I would take anybody on in a debate about terminology, and I think I would, I'm not trying to be a QI, but I think we could have a very good debate. But is the public having this debate? And how can we help them have this debate? Is it a mental health app or a mental illness app? Is it a well-being app or is it a happy app? I mean, it all gets a bit confusing. The second thing is measures, and these are very, very difficult things to measure. We're measuring elements of that state in between the conscious and the unconscious world. How you think, feel, behave, relate. These are all very, very difficult things to measure and get at. And when we do get some measures, like the Warwick-Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale, which we had something to do with in Scotland, that's why we put Edinburgh there, but it doesn't really matter, you get criticised for actually not measuring, for measuring the opposite of mental illness, which isn't what we set out to measure. So it's very, very tricky. And the evidence, who decides on the evidence? Randomized controlled trials for mental well-being, well, that would be expensive and a little bit nonsensical to do. So what about the evidence of citizens, that it helps, it works, it's good for them? What about the evidence of good practice? It seems to be emerging, it seems to be making a difference. Not everything has to be randomized and controlled to count as evidence. And mobilizing action, how do we get the public to speak about these things in ways that will be meaningful to them and others? So big challenges, and that's just on a Monday. Now, this is the slide that I put up, and it's a little bit dense, but let me just talk you through it. So I'm all for Nick Clegg announcing another thing that the Lib Dems are going to do for mental health services. I think that's great that one political party actually cares enough to stand up in every podium they can and say something about it. So that's great. The chances of them being, sorry, I better not stray into difficult territory. However, it's great someone's saying that, but despite all this increased awareness and growing concern and commitment about mental health, read mental illness, and read the lobby for more money for mental illness treatment services, not that that's a bad thing, but it's a bad thing if it's not balanced. The discussion is still dominated by mental illness and often pejorative. The burden of mental illness, followed Dame Sally's report. Well, what about the burden of cancer? I'm pretty sure that people suffering from cancer and in recovery from cancer wouldn't like to be called a burden on the state. So why do we allow that to happen? Any new investments always seem to be targeted at downstream investment, downstream services. That's good, because maybe you've kind of worked out that 75% are in a treatment gap. Well, are they in a treatment gap, or are they just not voting to go to services because they haven't seen what the benefit of services might be to them? Or as some of the other speakers said, how much evidence do we put into some of the current services we provide? So I think that we have a little bit of a problem. And then there's low understanding of what good mental health actually is and the outcomes that can improve. But it's a problem because the NHS doesn't benefit. If you put good money into good mental health, yes, the NHS will benefit, but criminal justice will benefit more, education services will benefit more, etc., etc. So it's a tricky one, and it's a lot easier just doing it in a silo of NHS and services, isn't it? And poor evidence of real embedding and integrating. When I talk to my obesity colleagues in public health about what is driving someone to over or undereat, what is driving someone to abuse the way in which they treat food in such a way that it's making them ill, likely to die younger. And they will give me responses about managing weight and the diet that we should know and all the information we know. But what about the social, psychological, and emotional impulses behind why someone is doing that? So it's not what you're doing, it's what's happened to you that you choose this way of behaving. And I think we're missing the opportunity to integrate those things. And that's not a mental illness service. That's a good way of looking after our social, psychological, and emotional well-being that will have an effect on our physical well-being. So we're not embedding these things well enough. And actually, if you look at it, the major social determinants of the things we're talking about could be solved by much greater social policies, further upstream. I don't know if any of you have read Danny Dorling's 1% or Mary O'Hara's Austerity Bites. Some of the solutions to improve mental health of a nation lie in those documents. Gosh, so new technology. You didn't expect this at 4:25, did you? So new technologies, how on earth can we address some of these challenges through new technologies, digital and other solutions? Well, some of the recent work we're involved in, and I loved the conversation you're having about big data. We have established with NHS England, and we're still looking for their investment in this, but we're happy to hold the investment chain on the intelligence network till they find the money, is about using big data. We've taken 45 national data sets provided by 13 data organizations into one intelligence network. And we've got lots of data, but like you, we'd like to analyze it creatively. We'd like to use it in a much more transparent way. So if any of you, if that's your bag, please come and see me afterwards. And we have a marvelous chap called James Seward who's managing this project nationally, and it's just got some amazing potential. So have a look at it. We've made the website totally unpronounceable and difficult, but then that's the government digital services problem, that we don't have an open access government digital service to information like this, but we'll get there. The second one is the Wellbeing What Works Centre. The government and ESRC are piling lots of money into What Works centres. We're helping to create a centre in wellbeing. And one of the issues we will be looking at as a cross-cutting theme is the use of new technologies and digital creativity to try and get a better understanding of what works, and bringing some of that, not necessarily to market, but bringing the evidence of what's working to a wider audience, because that's what work centres are all about, knowledge mobilization. And the last thing is something that Mark touched upon, which is actually we don't know the granular detail of people's lives very well. So let's use some modern technological solutions through blogging, asking anybody who wishes to blog once a day, one day every season, on what gets in the way of their mental health, what improves their well-being. So people living and are in recovery from mental illness or mental health difficulties get the chance to say granularly what really matters to their lives. Hugely exciting project, 1,000 people signed up. We've got over 500 people already blogged from day one, a mass amount of material. Look on the website, there's lots of great stories there which give us the granular detail, which gives us more insight into people's lives. So, a lot of interesting work. I'm loving some of the using the data to drive awareness. I'm loving some of the social media awareness raising. I think that's totally untapped. I think co-production obviously is essential, but the best aspect of that work seems to be in young people's work as much as I've seen. I was loving reading about Project 99 in Greater Glasgow Health Board, a health board investing in talking to young people about what digital technology might work for them. Amazing. I'm not going to say only in Scotland, but my father would probably want me to at this point. And the project funded by the Mental Health Foundation and the Hamlin Trust right here, another fantastic project. Face-to-face use, many, many examples. It would be churlish of me to pick out one because one of you is going to come down and say, why didn't you mention our one? So you're all great. And things for people to do for themselves. Well, I really quite like this. This is done by a colleague of mine in Scotland. Did I say Scotland again? And it's called the Ginsberg Project. And this is the Scottish Government. You want to read the first page. Government is investing in this as a social enterprise, as an incubator, because we want to see something creative happen in this space, so we're just trying it out to see what you think. That's amazing government speak. I love that. So I think we need to be a little bit more interesting like that. So I'm really enjoying that. And scaling up, less reliance on the face-to-face, using some other things. I think there's lots of untapped potential there. And that whole notion of community and social connectedness, we're doing some projects in social isolation. And the use of technology to map areas of social isolation, the use of technologies to enable older people to be engaged with others through technology is just so amazing. I really am gobsmacked at some of those potentials. So if social isolation is one of our next public health emergencies, then we've got some great digital creativity around that space. So going forward, this is what a colleague said to me when I said, what should I say? And they basically said, well, get out, stand back, don't let Public Health England and the dead hand of government touch any of this, which is kind of what you were saying a little bit earlier. So I'm going to fast forward on to the last slide and say, well, I looked at the NHS Confed's thing about digital e-mental health, and I didn't see the words public health or population health or people's health enough. I saw lots about illnesses and services. So I'm just kind of here pleading that when you have this conference next year, that there'll be more of me, not me, but more of people in the public health space, and that you will be seeing mental health as a much broader enterprise, and you'll be coming back with some digital and technological solutions that help me and many, many others resolve some of the challenges that we face, because we are on the cusp of creating a new narrative for mental health, and one that isn't defined by what's wrong with you. Thank you.